Hey guys, Kelade here. Welcome to my patch 8.0 Fury Warrior Guide in Battle for Azeroth. Now the last Fury Guide that we made was back at the end of Legion, so let's update it for this expansion. One thing to note is that Blizzard does seem like they're planning a class/spec tuning change sometime in the upcoming week. We don't know if this will affect Fury or not, but if there are significant changes, I'll of course update you guys on that. Now starting off, we do want to look at the talents. The talents that I am going to be skipping is going to be the level 30 row and the level 60 row, because these are more like the defensive talents, right, in regards to the Sims. Of all the other DPS talents that's in this tree, I've combined them, and there's around 243 combinations, right, and here they all are in regards to where they stack up. I'll of course have the links for all of these Sims from Raidbots down in the description below if you guys want to poke around there. But if we just look at what is the highest simming single target talent setup, that is this, the 2-1-3-3-1-2-3, and that is where you're going to be seeing here: Endless Rage, Double Time, Fierce Slash, Warpaint, Carnage, Dragon Roar, and Siegebreaker. Now of course the biggest note here is going to be their Fierce Slash. If you somehow really don't like the Fierce Slash playstyle where you have to keep up another buff, you need to use it, you can always go Sudden Death, right? Sudden Death is right here in second place. For my character, is only like 70 DPS behind, so it's not too different. You could really play with either one that you want, but if you're curious about the Fierce Slash, all you have to do is just keep up the Fierce Slash buff, the 3x version, right? You want to stack it up to 3 and just not lose it for the fight. That's it. Now for pure single target, this is like the absolute best talent setup right now. As far as for any AoE is concerned, then you're going to go with Sudden Death or Enrage. Both of these talents way outclass Fierce Slash and AoE. In regards to which one is better for which AoE, Enrage is going to be better for more consistent AoE. So for the entirety of the fight, there's going to be 3 or more targets. Let's say there's 3 bosses and you can just constantly cleave them, then Enrage will win out over Sudden Death. But if at any point, let's say the boss spawns ads or the ads die, or there's some period of time where you're only hitting one target at a time, then it's very likely that Sudden Death is going to win. But as far as for just comparing single target damages, right, Sudden Death does beat Enrage, but if you're doing pure single target where there's no ads, no additional target, then Fierce Slash is going to win. But not to worry, the rotation for all these aren't that different. They're basically the same thing with the exception of the Fierce Slash stacking we talked about. So let's get started then right into the rotation part. First, I do want to mention as far as your cooldown use, right, your Recklessness is really your one big cooldown. And of course, now that we talented in a Siegebreaker, that's kind of like our mini cooldown. But Recklessness, you basically just use this as soon as available. Just like Battlecry was back in Legion, when you have this up, you just go, right? You don't need to wait until you have a certain rage anymore because we don't have the legendary pants that we had back in Legion, so Rampage doesn't give you more rage, so don't worry about that. As far as for Siegebreaker, when you're going to be using it, you can also use that as soon as possible too. So you don't have to stack Siegebreaker and Recklessness, but you could, right? So for example, if Siegebreaker is going to be up in 5 seconds and you have Recklessness ready, like you could wait the 5 seconds, right? That's not that big of a deal. But generally, if you just use it as soon as possible, it's kind of the same as trying to syncing them up. And as far as for like syncing what up, you kind of want to hold Siegebreaker and use Recklessness as opposed to the other way around, right? Recklessness is the much bigger cooldown, so that's the more important one to get out as many as you can in a fight. So if the difference between you're going to use, 4 Recklessness versus 5, that's a huge difference to your DPS. So that's basically it for our buffs and debuff. There isn't that many that you have to worry about right now. Going into our general rotation, it's actually, I think, simpler in some ways than Legion because now we just have one list that we can follow. We don't have to worry about a different list for execute phase, and we also don't have to worry about 2 different lists for AoE, right? Basically, the only difference between our single target and AoE rotation is that you just want to have the Whirlwind Cleave buff up. That's it, right? So every time before you use single target abilities, you just want to whirlwind the targets and make sure that you get this whirlwind buff, and then you use 2 single target abilities, and then you continue. Of course, a reminder that your Siegebreaker can cleave from that. So, right, I hit that Siegebreaker and it went on the target. So make sure that if you're going to be using Siegebreaker in an AoE fight, that you do, of course, whirlwind before that too. Now, as far as for your single target priority, if you do have Fury Slash talented, of course, you are going to want to get that to 3 stacks as soon as possible. That also means in the beginning of fight, even though you have all of your cooldowns, you do want to charge in and just Fury Slash 3 times. That's actually how you kind of want to use this ability. Now, could you just ignore Fury Slash for the very first burst with Recklessness that you do? Yeah, you actually could. It's not too big of a difference if you wait for that cooldown window to be over before you start stacking up your Fury Slash, but it's not too different, so it's really up to you. You can either charge up and do 3x Fury Slash, or you can just begin with your cooldowns and ignore Fury Slash stacking until it's over, but Either one works fine. I would probably still stick with the charging it and doing Fear Slash 3 times and then using your cooldowns. Doesn't really matter too much. It kind of seems very, very similarly. Now, as far as for the rest of the rotation, ignoring the Fear Slash, this is how it's going to go down, right? Highest priority is going to be rampaging at 90 or more rage. Basically, you don't want to rage cap. You don't want to waste any rage, right? So you want to rampage when you get to that point. Or if you're in recklessness, you do want to rampage as soon as you get it, because if you hit a raging blow, for example, when you're at 75 rage, that's actually just going to double to 24 rage, and then you're going to cap right there. So that's why during the recklessness cooldown, you do just want to use rampage as much as possible, because you're gaining so much rage during that time too. Then it's going to be enraged executes. So if you have sudden death, then you use it. If not, then obviously that's not going to happen until execute phase. Then it's going to be enraged raging blow if you have both stacks ready. So right here you can see that when I don't hit anything, obviously I have 2 stacks of raging blow. So that's at this point. If you're enraged and you have 2 stacks available, then you want to use it here. After that, it is going to be the Enraged Dragon Roar. So if you're enraged and you have Dragon Roar, great. Next in the priority, it's just going to be Bloodthirst. Doesn't matter if you're enraged or not here. And then next after that is going to be Raging Blow, regardless of how many stacks that you have. And then lastly, you do have either Fear Slash or Whirlwind, depending on whether or not you have the Fear Slash talent. And of course, one last thing to add in regards to our on-use trinkets, right? Right now, I do have the Bygone Bee Almanac, that trinket, and the Darkmoon Deck Fathoms are going to be your best in slot right now before the raid comes out. Both of them are BOE, so if you have the gold, you can buy them. As far as for this trinket, you are going to be using it when you actually do that very first rampage, or if your Bloodthirst just happens to proc the enraged, then you can use it there, right? Increasing your mastery when you're not enraged actually doesn't do anything for you as a Fury Warrior, so right here, this trinket, I will be using it, you'll see, when I use my first rampage. I'm going to show you guys 2 sample rotations. One is going to be with a Fear Slash build right here, and the other one I'll be using Sudden Death instead, right? They're very, very similar with the exception of I'm going to charge in and do 3 Fear Slash right now, right? So I'm going to charge in, do 3 Fear Slashes, and then after that, I'm going to do Recklessness, and then Siegebreaker, and then if I don't have Rage, I have Bloodthirst, and I do Rampage with the Almanac, and do a Raging Blow, then Dragon's Roar, Rampage, Raging Blow, Rampage, Raging Blow, and Bloodthirst, and just like that, right? And that's going to be your opener for that. And then really quickly, once my cooldowns reset, we'll be right back. One thing I do want to really quickly add is that for the Bygone Bee Almanac, you could actually make a macro to where you use this trinket and the Rampage at the same time, because it is off the global cooldown. So you guys saw like right in the open right there, I did use it slightly late in regards to my Rampage. So if you want to make it perfect, you could actually make a macro that does that. But our cooldowns are going to be already set here, except for the troll ratio, but it's okay if we don't have that. So right now we're using Sudden Death, right? So we're actually just going to charge in and we're going to do Recklessness first, and then Siegebreaker, and then begin the rest of our rotation, right? So charge in, Recklessness, Siegebreaker, right? Bloodthirst, still no rage, Raging Blow, and then we Rampage with the Almanac, and then Dragon's Roar. We got to execute proc, perfect, and we Rampage, and Bloodthirst, Raging Blow, and then Rampage, and then you continue with that. There was a point where my Raging Blow did reset there, and I was at 2 stacks while in Rage, so I should have used a Raging Blow there. But as far as for getting lucky enough to get your execute to proc on pull, that basically is the most amount of luck that you could have with the Sudden Death talents, is that if your execute procs in that initial burst, you get that large burst of rage and that pretty good burst in damage. So that's kind of what you're hoping for with the Sudden Death. Obviously, it's more RNG than Fury Slash, right? Fury Slash is always basically going to be the same, where Sudden Death, if it always keeps proccing during Recklessness, then of course it'll be slightly better than average. So it's your choice still on really which one to pick, but I think I'll stick with Fury Slash for now as far as for the opening of the raid. So that basically covers your talents and your rotations, and that's kind of like the most of the things that you need to get ready for the raid. But there's a couple more things, more like consumables and enchants, right? So as far as for enchanting, here's my current warrior. Now on my main hand, of course, I do have the haste enchant, which is the quick navigation enchant, because haste is the best simming secondary stat for me. As far as for the offhand, on the screen you can kind of see the different enchants, right? So you have crit, you have gale force, mastery, verse, or you can even enchant double haste if you wanted to. As far as for what's winning, it used to be crit and mastery were winning. Now, of course, I did talk about in a previous video that Gale Force did receive a buff recently. So right now, it's actually simming for my current character pretty close to mastery and crit. Actually, exactly the same numbers. You can definitely play around with that if you wanted to. Gale Force just gives you like a 15% attack speed when you proc it. So try that out if you want to. Really not too different between the other two, I guess. Maybe Gale Force is cheaper than crit or mastery because you do get access to it before the crit and mastery. As far as for what potions to use, there really are just 2 potions that you can use in this expansion. That's going to be the Bursting Blood and the Battle of Strength. Bursting Blood versus Battle Potion of Strength is literally just the Legion version of Old War versus Prolonged Power. Bursting Blood is better for single target, and then Battle Potion of Strength is going to be better once you get into like the bigger AoE stuff. So for single target, you're going to go with Bursting Blood. Basically, it works similarly to Old War does, so Bursting Blood for single target, great. Now for food buffs, the Feast is going to be the highest simming DPS, right? So if you guys are able to afford it, go with the Feast. If not, you can really use any of the other food depending on your haste, right? So generally, haste is going to be the best. Now you're seeing on my character, haste isn't necessarily the best because I have a ring that just gives me a crazy amount of haste and all that stuff, right? So don't worry about that. Just know that yes, you can really use any of the foods, but for most characters right now, haste will probably be better for you, especially actually if you want to play with sudden death, right? Because if you take Fury Slash, you're gaining that 6% haste, that is going to be factored into these sims. So if you want to play Sudden Death, then the value of haste gets even higher because now you lose essentially 6% haste. So take that into consideration when you're choosing these 2 talents and then what food buff you want to get. Now, as far as for gearing, you're still going to have your Reckless Flurry and then your Thunderous Blast here as your best Azeroth traits. There is, of course, going to be a new Azeroth trait once the raid comes out. It is very likely that that is going to be the strongest when you're actually in the raid. So definitely look out for that. Obviously, you just can't have that at the moment, but when the raid comes out, definitely try to get it. Not only for the fact that the raid is going to drop, of course, higher eye level Azeroth gear than you're currently used to, and it's going to be probably easier actually to get it from raid than other places, because right now in Mythic Plus, you cannot get Azeroth gear from the end of dungeon drops, right? You only get Azeroth gear from Mythic Plus once per week, and that's at the end of the week in your weekly chest. So in comparison to like how much Azeroth gear that we're getting right now, going to the future, it's probably going to be slightly hard to get it. So it's good that they made them tradable. Just know that it might be harder. On the other hand, what this means is that if your current weapons aren't too great, don't worry, because when Mythic Plus comes out, now that all that Azeroth gear is off the table, your probability of getting a weapon actually is going to increase, right? So of course, when Mythic Plus comes out, if you can of course get the Getiku, the bleed weapon, definitely try to get it. I still don't have it, right? I have these 2 weapons, so try to get it if you can. If it's the same eye level as your current weapon, it's definitely going to win. Even if it's 5 or 10 eye levels lower, it might even still win. And then of course, as far as for the rest of the gear, you're generally going to go for the highest eye level. Strength is very, very important here. And if something is similar eye level, it actually doesn't matter too much as a Fury Warrior, right? Because if you look right now, my Fury Slash skill weights, right? So here they are. Haste is the highest, right? And then you have Mastery, Crit, and Verse. But those are all kind of similar, right? It's not too different. As far as for Sudden Death, however, right, we did mention that there's going to be slight differences. The value of haste does go higher, so now it's 1.65, and then the other ones are kind of similar to what they were. Mastery got slightly higher too. So do note that, right? Obviously, if you have Sudden Death, you're going to want a little bit more haste than Fury Slash because you're not going to get that 6% from the talent. But yeah, that should be all you guys need in order to do really great DPS as a Fury Warrior in the upcoming raid. Hopefully you guys all get great drops, good luck in your progression, and as always, thanks for checking out the video guys, and feel free to subscribe to see more. See ya!